What are civilian builds and why are they ruining Stellaris' balance? That's what this video is going to be about. If you don't play Stellaris or you aren't caught up to the meta, then I'm going to explain everything for you so you can perfectly understand why civilian builds are kind of actually bad for the meta and why them being this strong is kind of unfun. For those of you who do play Stellaris, I'm going to show you how to do a generic civilian build. I'm not going to play this perfectly, I'm just going to do it in a representation through here, all live with no editing. There will be no editing, there will be no cuts, I won't do anything funny here. I'm going to choose the most generic build in the game. The United Nations of Earth. For those of you who don't play Stellaris, this is the default generic build. There's nothing special about this. It is the most generic starter build imaginable. Okay, so I'm gonna go to default settings. So once again, we're not gonna do anything special, and I'm gonna go to Ensign instead of Cadet, because Cadet is actually easy, Ensign is actually the normal difficulty. It just defaults to easy, so new players don't get crushed. So we're here, we're on a generic build, we're not doing anything special. Okay, for those of you who might play a lot of Stellaris, you might be thinking, okay, how are you gonna break the build? How are you gonna break the game this quickly on just the starter build? Well, it's actually gonna be really obvious. Now, for those of you who don't play Stellaris, I am using a UI mod right now. For those of you who don't play Stellaris, civilians and how they're breaking the game are these guys down here. They're these little dudes down here. They're not doing anything special, they're not doing anything funny. They're just basically normal starter dudes. I haven't built them a building. Once you build buildings or districts like stuff like that, they'll get a job and they should get more powerful because they'll actually have a job and they'll have more upkeep to pay for the job and things like that. But instead of that, we're not really gonna want to do that. Instead, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna fire all my technicians. We don't really want them. I'm going to fire, let's see, let's go down to about there. So we're going to fire a bunch of our farmers like that. We're going to go to our holo theater and we are going to immediately demolish it. Don't need it, don't want it, not very important. And that's it. So how are these generic unemployed dudes, these civilians, going to break the game? Technology won't matter. Once again, we're not going to do any cuts, we're not going to do anything like that. None of that matters. We're not even going to get to that far. Science ship, we're just going to put on auto. I promise you, before we get anywhere, it will be very obvious why this build has basically nothing you can do to catch up to it. There's almost nothing you can do to catch up to this build. I mean, I don't know a better way to put it. You can't. If someone does a civilian build and you don't do a civilian build, or if you decide to play 2 games back to back against the AI, when you do a civilian build, you will very quickly see why it has such an insurmountable advantage in the early game that it's not very fair. Now, all I've really done here is I'm buying consumer goods and I'm buying some minerals. Now, I did forget to do one thing really quick. We're going to put ourselves real quick onto Utopian Abundance. Now, what is Utopian Abundance? This is a living standard. Civilians now produce unity and research points and get 20% more job efficiency. And everybody in my empire now gets 20% more happiness. Now, this will be really obvious real quick. Happiness affects the stability, which affects your job output. Civilians down here are now going to be producing research and unity, which they didn't before. The one drawback you might be saying to yourself is, okay, well, you're losing a lot of consumer goods, surely. So, I mean, the build's going to collapse. You're not going to be able to continue to play it forever. You're going to go bankrupt in 12 months, in fact. But instead of going bankrupt, I'm going to not go bankrupt and instead actually build an auto-thon monument. Once I do that, we're going to peel back on some of our mineral buying, and we're going to go up on some of the consumer goods buying. Now, I'm just winging this on the fly. Obviously, some people could probably min-max this a bit more. Basically, we're taking our trade goods. We can do a little bit more here, in fact. We're taking our trade, and we're making sure that we are kind of evening these out. Now, civilian builds are pretty good doing trade. Already through doing that, you might have noticed here, those of you who, those of you who play this game a lot, you're probably thinking to yourself, okay, well, I did the habitable worlds, but I denied it. I took the unity from that. Okay, so we went into mercantile and we went into trickle up economics, which is kind of funny. Our civilians now get trade and amenities. You're probably understanding where this one's already going, right? So we're just gonna buy more consumer goods to pay for our civilians. And we now produce even more trade to pay for these consumer goods. We're actually gonna go to 21, in fact. And we're still building the auto-thon monument. Now, 21 is the most consumer goods you can buy before you start hitting diminishing returns, but we just need to sit here and do, well, really nothing. Once this completes, the build is pretty much already done, and you can see we started at 50 research, we're already at 94. We've almost doubled our research. Our unity started at 20. We're already at 41. We've doubled our unity. So we've doubled our unity, we've doubled our research, and we haven't even built a building yet. So now we're gonna go adaptive economic policies. Our trade normally turns into these energy credits. You guys are seeing that energy credits right here, right? So instead, what this policy allows us to do, this game does get complicated, trust me, but this allows us to do, instead of, in fact, we could actually go with a civilian economy for the early game. So let's do that just to show a little bit more about, but I'm not going to talk about that. This will turn our trade into energy credits. Okay. Instead, we're going to turn our we're going to turn our trade into unity. Unity is what I was using to get the society management. This is scaling, this is late game, this is power, right? So once we do that, you can see my unity will now kick all the way up to 82. So we started a mere year and 4 months ago at 20. We are now at 82. I'm positive on consumer goods. We are not in the negatives at all for any reason. Everything's going fine. Everything's going great. No drawbacks whatsoever. We've now completed the Autochthon Monument. Now, this is a special building that gives additional benefits to our civilians based on our ethics. So long as we have 1 point in egalitarian, this entire point works. And this is what's frustrating about it. Everybody needs 1 point in egalitarian in the current environment, which is not great balance. It's very restrictive. But if we have egalitarian and we have xenophile, once we build this Autochthon Monument, our xenophile pops will get reduced upkeep on all our population, and our egalitarian pops will create more trade. Well, you probably can understand where this one is going. All these consumer goods that I just built to give my pops more upkeep. I gave my pops more upkeep from consumer goods on the monument. I gave my pops more upkeep from consumer goods on their lifestyle. I gave my pops more upkeep from consumer goods on triple up economics. 3 different times I increased their consumer goods upkeep. And yet I am positive on consumer goods. That's because my pops now take less upkeep and they are now producing a lot of research and unity. Unity is now 140. 140 is not an amount of unity that is small. This is a lot of unity. In fact, this is so much unity that normal builds basically can't compete with this anymore. It's just too much unity. So then we're gonna head and we're gonna go and get more trade from jobs. More trade from jobs will of course trickle into more unity. There's 144 now. We have consumer goods, we have unity. We are only losing a little bit of our energy credits, our food. In fact, we can go ahead and we can remove some of these farmers. We don't really need that much food, do we? And once these farmers get out of their farming job, instead they will be civilians and they will do nothing at all. And somehow this will make them more powerful. So to really double down on this build, we're gonna go ahead and build a luxury residence, which gives us more housing and amenities. With housing and amenities, amenities will give us happiness, which we're already producing way too much of anyway, but it will give us housing through no jobs. We're just building them houses. We're building them houses to live in so that they can continue to exist. And I'm gonna go ahead and do, this is amenities from traders. You're supposed to actually be doing traders with this build. I just decided not to. With our spare 143 trade that we're making, let's go ahead and buy the absolute maximum energy before we hit diminishing returns. The absolute maximum, it's just, I mean, screw it, let's buy food. Why not? I mean, we got everything, right? Like, why do we need farmers? We don't need farmers. Just fire all of them, gone. Make them into civilians, because apparently this will actually make us more food. No one's working. No one is working actually right now. All we have is 400 miners to get us minerals so we can actually build buildings, and no one else is working in the worker jobs. And we're totally fine. So as you can imagine, with now 154 unity, most regular builds would have a great amount of difficulty scaling up to this build. 3,400 of our population, of our 5.2 thousand population, is just sitting there as a civilian. See, the more civilians we have, the more we reduce the upkeep of our civilians. Now, once we get this housing complex done here, the only real weakness with this build is its lack of housing. Housing will, of course, reduce our population growth, but that's why we're producing this luxury residence, to give our people some houses. We already are completed with mercantilism. Once again, totally default settings, and we're done with it in 2.5 years. Okay, so we're gonna grab one vision just to generate a bit more unity, because of course 173 unity is just a normal number right now. There comes the luxury residence. Once you have the luxury residence, that improves our housing. Housing improves the amount of population we're growing. We're growing more population to continue to sit into our civilians, and that's it. At this point, there's really no build that could possibly have scaled evenly with this build. I'm already by far stronger than anyone else in the game. Okay, so let's stop being funny for now. What do I actually suggest then to fix this civilian issue? Okay, now number one, this should be pretty obvious. I think perhaps trickle up economics is a little too strong, perhaps. The amount of trade it generates is perhaps a little high. It should probably lose the amenities, if not the trade. I think the amenities stacks up maybe a little too much. We already have 13,000 amenities, which is more than enough for practically the entire game, which is a bit silly. The trade from civilians might be fine, doing civilian builds might be fine, but of course this leads us to the problem that we have through Utopian Abundance gained through Egalitarian. We have 20% job efficiency for civilians starting day one. That job efficiency affects the trade we give to civilians. It also affects the unity and resource points we give to civilians. It also affects through this monument, the unity again we give to our civilians, and the effects we give to our civilians, which are even more trade, pop-up keep reduction, and governing ethics attraction. Governing ethics attraction, for those guys who don't know, will make everyone in our empire love being a xenophile. That means you love aliens, love being a xenophile, and love being egalitarian. Why? Because apparently these xenophile egalitarians have figured out a way to have very few people work and everyone gets everything they want, which honestly is like the perfect government form. So I would very much, honestly, if they could show me how this works, I would be all for it. I'd just go, okay, you know what? You win. Like I admit defeat. Everything you say is completely correct. I cannot argue with your very infallible logic. Okay, so what needs to be fixed here? Okay, obviously, trickle up economics is very strong. The mercantile tree is currently being used. Maybe not so much for mercantile, maybe it's being used a bit too much for civilians. Now, I do think the mercantile tree should remain viable. It hasn't been viable in years, and now it's finally viable, which I think is good. I actually do think that mercantile should be a good, useful tree. So I do believe if trickle up economics gets nerfed a bit, maybe you could give some buffs to some other parts of the tree, maybe to commercial enterprise. Amenities per traders could maybe go up or something like that. I don't know. Maybe each district creates trader jobs automatically. I don't know. I think the tree should be good, but right now it's being used way too much to sprint down and dominate the game starting from, honestly, before even you unpause. Before you even unpause, you can set this build to work. Okay, so that's the number one issue. The number two issue is obviously you need to put 1 point in egalitarian to unlock Utopian Abundance. Now, Utopian Abundance does exactly what it says. It's a Utopian Abundance. I mean, they weren't lying. And the problem with egalitarian's Utopian Abundance is throughout the course of the game, through technology, through anything else, there's nothing in the game where you can scale up to get any living style that can match Utopian Abundance. This means that every single player in the game who actually wants to compete has to put 1 point in Utopian Abundance. I don't think that's good for diversity, and I don't think that's good for game balance, that literally everyone has to go Utopian Abundance. It doesn't vibe with me. I just don't think that every build should have to do that. So I would suggest maybe through technology or some mechanic, I don't know, add another lifestyle, because social welfare is what regular people get. Not so civilians produce unity. Job efficiency for civilians 10%. Utopian Abundance blows that out of the water. But the thing is, egalitarian is perfectly fine on its own. In fact, it's totally fine. It gives us specialist pop resource output and faction resource output. So fanatic egalitarian is not just on its own, just sitting here being weak. In fact, it's quite good. The counterpart, authoritarian, there's authoritarian and egalitarian. Authoritarian gets its own unique lifestyle too, which, much like Utopian Abundance, well, no, actually, it's the complete opposite of Utopian Abundance. It's completely terrible. No upside whatsoever, just nerfs you. Literally just nerfs you. So instead of being a choice between authoritarian and egalitarian, it's egalitarian or int yourself to death, which I don't think is a good trade-off. So personally, again, everyone throughout the game should at least be able to get something, not maybe to match utopian abundance, but throughout the course of the game, people should get something that can at the very least sort of compete against it. Like, okay, you have a society trait or something where you can social welfare, you can get something above social welfare, maybe call it social abundance, and your unemployed, or sorry, your civilians produce research and unity, maybe not give the happiness, maybe not give the 20% job efficiency, have utopian abundance be stronger, but give something to other people that they can compete. Because you can see right here, for those who don't maybe play Stellaris as much, if I built this research lab, I would get 15 research. I would have to build 3 research labs back to back to back, which I might not even be done with by this point. I would have to build those 3 back to back to back to equal the research I'm currently getting just by doing what I showed. So this build is already ahead in technology, and Stellaris is a very snowbally game. So by being ahead in technology, I'm getting all these new technologies much quicker than other people, which in turn is allowing me to outscale them. It's not that this build scales poorly, it's that this build scales quite well by giving you such an amazing head start. So with the current setup of the game, that's what I would suggest. There's currently, definitely through biological ascension, which I'm not going to go into, but definitely through biological ascension, there's currently way too much pop growth in the game anyway. You will end up with a lot of civilians, and memes aside, I do think civilians are a perfectly fine system. I think they're totally cool and all that. Military civilians are obviously too weak. Naval capacity is obviously just not... It's good in the hyper late game, but obviously it's just not good in the early game. It's just not something that's actually helping. And because of that, militarist has just become... it was already pretty bad, but now it's like dead. Like, it was already like struggling, and now it's just drowning at the bottom of the pool. So definitely look at militarist. Authoritarian, same. It was already dead at the bottom of the pool. Now it's deader at the bottom of the pool, if that was at all possible. So just look into that stuff, and definitely peel back some of this early game power from civilian builds, because for absolute, I don't even have a faction or anything, and I'm generating 170 unity. I'm not really sure, like, the only builds that can generate this much unity are builds that are putting everything into unity generation. So it's just not reasonable, in my opinion. So that's it. That's all I wanted to show. These are civilian builds. This is how to do it. It's not complicated. It's quite simple. It's obviously an oversight by the developers. I don't think they considered that people would just go this ham on the civilians. But there you go. So that's the problem. Thank you all for watching. Thank you all for being here. Thank you, everybody. And as always, have a great rest of your day. Oh, make sure to like and subscribe. Yay!